let's start from the beginning. Your journey with starting a company, or actually before that, you had your mind in training yourself in the neuroscience field. Why?
Well, it can be a very long story, I guess, but basically I was very interested in math and physics all along, and actually that was my first thinking to do theoretical physics research in string theory, which was kind of new at the time. And I was quite good and ambitious at it, but later I changed my mind. I was not so sure about this. Well, for whatever reason, I changed into a medical field, and here clearly the biggest unknown was neuroscience. I mean, how the brain works and how memories are formed. I mean, this was the new frontier in my mind, and that was so fascinating. And math and physics, was my belief, was the key to understand the brain. Not doing anatomy work or not doing traditional chemistry work. It was really to understand this from an information theory point of view. So that's where I started. And neural networks are really new at this time, so that was sort of a pioneering field with the first papers just being published. And I realized soon that if you can do this for letters, of course you can do it for cells. And so during my medical studies I actually looked on these cells, and well, it was very boring and somewhat hard, but it was possible. And I realized by combining a camera and computer, you could actually solve this problem. So that's how CellaVision started.
But when was why did you, there are several scientists here in Lund. Not all of them starts companies. What was driving you?
I guess that's maybe a personality thing. When I realized you could do this, for me it became something I had to do. It was not a question if I should do it, I had to do it. It was so obvious and it would be so great and would improve so much. So I didn't really ask myself why, I just felt this, I have to do this. And of course my professor wasn't sharing those ideas, so he was more and more upset that at the end of the PhD period, I think let's see, maybe I had 15 employees or something. And finishing a PhD or running this by that time, also CTEC was created, Anoto. So at that time, basically I had to choice, so I kind of left that thing behind. But I actually had 6 publications, so later on I actually finished my PhD, much later, this year actually.
Give him an applause, I think that's amazing. That you go back to the academia.
Yeah, great job. So you were driven by the fact that you could actually improve society with this?
I guess so. Maybe I didn't formulate it this way. I just felt this product is needed. We need to do it this way.
Yeah.
And of course, all the things you suspected were true. This is done different in different places with different results, and you can't share results from one side to another because however they count these cells, because you have to understand that cells are really a continuum. When they come out, they're differentiated and they look distinct like letters, but they come from same progenitor cells, and these also leak out. So there's also a continuous distribution of these cells in the blood, much fewer, but still. And that means there is no sharp line. It's an arbitrary line, and only a machine can draw this line in a precise way. And that's the only way to standardize also these results, so they can talk to each other. Plus the fact that once you look in this microscope, it's 100x magnification with oil, so it's the highest optical magnification you can have with your eyes. The cells, they are extremely tiny obviously, but once you have seen a cell, you can never, once you move the microscope, find it again in that world. There's it's such a small spot, you can never find it, so you can never share this result with anyone. So in a way, you don't have any traceability either. I saw this cell. How do you know that? Well, I saw it. So so the digitization is one thing, and then the other thing is, of course, the recognition, doing the different classification of cells.
Yeah. And you started here, 1985.
Yeah, it was a barrack there. We were 20 persons. I used to say it was 2 persons that know anything, and we were 18 from the university. And we had a person, Nils Rydbeck, Jacob remembers him, or he's still alive. He showed me a big matchbox and said, 10 years from now we will make a cell phone this big as a big matchbox. And those days I was a PhD student at computer science in American Analyze. So I took 1 year off to sabbatical, and I probably am still off. but
so you have that
yeah,
left
exactly.
to do.
But I think he has followed his field. I have not. But that was the story. And we were 20 guys doing the first mobile phones. Those days we call it a pocket phone, but that was because our sales guys were having special shirts with very big pockets, so we could put the phone inside. That was my beginning. And this was 85, 86.
85, 86, and the rest here was all of farmland?
Yeah, exactly. Then this was built, and I was head of the RF group, and then we had the second floor. We have our radio RF department here.
In this house?
In this house, exactly. We're sitting there.
So the first Ericsson mobile phones.
Yes.
That's cool. That's what somebody called Sir Tore Holm always talks about. Yes.
Yes.
But why did you skip your training and education to do this? What was driving you?
That stupid guy you remember the phones were this big and they had a wire to most of the phones those days, and someone said we should make a mobile phone this big and we should produce 1 million. And I just felt that was crazy and they should be wireless. So I mean, of course, if you meet that type of crazy guys, then you
have to jump on it.
You have to test it. It was and it has really been an amazing journey.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
And later on, much later actually, you were the ones that presented the Bluetooth idea, the launch.
Yes. We take Bluetooth. 1994, Nils Rydbeck, the same person, he went into Ericsson Research Group with a sugar cube, a $5 bill, a AAA battery, and said, we want a wireless system that works on 2.4 gigahertz. And the two of the researchers, Sven Mattisson and Jaap Hadsen, they took the challenge to develop this Bluetooth, and we call it MC-Link those days, as a research project. Later on in 96, 97, we reformed it and called it Bluetooth as a technology project. And they worked for me. I was head of product development for all GSM phones here those days. And we were, so to say, forming that technology. And my main job was to talk to Nokia and Intel and Microsoft to create this industry standard. So that was when it was Bluetooth, or the Bluetooth SIG special interest group that still exists.
Were they? I mean, both of you have been working with disruptive technologies, changing all rules actually for how to do business and technology going forward.
You should. I think one very important thing to be disruptive is to be young, because then you don't understand that it's impossible. I feel nowadays that I have seen so many errors, I a little bit go back and, oh, that I've done before, that didn't work. So I think you should be young to be disruptive.
So a bit of naivety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of naivety.
I like that, in fact. So what is the difficulty with trying to persuade the whole market to actually change their way of doing things? What would you say?
Well, looking on CellaVision, we succeeded with that eventually. Anoto we didn't. I mean, because there was what we believe was a really strong need, namely that...
Maybe you have to tell them what Anoto was.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So Anoto was it still exists, this company actually. It turnover of 100 million SEK or something.
Wow.
Yeah, it never died. But it's the company was basically at some stage founded on the idea that a digital pen, everything you write can be stored and can be transmitted and can be shared. That was something every human would need, the same way they would need a mobile phone. So that was our belief and our vision. And that, of course, meant there was a billion user market, and of course that meant you needed a lot of capital to address this market and build this, because it really built a lot of fundamental technology blocks here.
Yeah.
But we failed because the need to capture your notes is not that strong. Most people don't care about their notes at that level. Some do, that's why it still exists, but most don't. In CellaVision's case, the need was clear. The moment we showed this to the ones doing the work, I mean, they fell in love with it. They said, this is wonderful. They even threatened to quit their job if they couldn't have this instrument. I mean, they really liked it. So here it was clear, and we worked with the end users day one to collect the cells, so we knew this. So in CellaVision we knew this worked. The challenge was to get it to market, which took 10 years.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it was a struggle, even so.
It was a big struggle,
Yeah.
and the problem was we couldn't afford to sell this to every end user, every hospital. We would have to go there, we'd have to talk to them. We couldn't afford that, so we have to sell indirectly. And it turned out the ones that we sell it through, they don't really like selling our instruments. So we have to still promote it to the end users. Even today, I would say, our great partners are slightly less interested in selling this instrument than we are, but the end users love it, and that's where the pull comes from. So we have to do kind of both, market it to the end users and still get, push from the...
Yeah, push and pull strategy we have read about, but you've actually done it.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
I think when it comes to mobile phone, you don't need any marketing. You just need to produce it. The hit was instantly when we had it. I mean, you remember Juppinal in the late 80s.
Yeah,
I mean, so our biggest problem was to double the production, the number of mobile phones we produced every
But
year.
is that really
Mats,
true?
I'd like to challenge that.
Yes, me too.
Because this goes to a sort of engineering saying, no, this is so good, it will sell itself.
Yeah.
And I mean, as an investor, if I hear that, I just leave the room, basically. And what I would say is this, Mats. Yes, you noticed when this product was tested that people liked it, and they would share this liking with other people. So there would be sort of a mini viral effect. It was on the internet, so it was not really viral, but still they would talk mouth to mouth. But what marketing is doing is accelerating this process in a positive way. So the growth rate is better because of sales effort. Otherwise, mobile phones have grown much slower.
I totally
It
agree.
would sell itself eventually, but at much slower pace.
I made it simpler, but sometimes we may need to simplify it. You're absolutely right. Marketing is very important in that sense, but in my job as a head of development, my biggest problem was to secure that you had enough suppliers, enough factories, enough suppliers who could produce the components. So and I had the sales guys had a much easier task than we had on. This we made 2, 4, 8, 16. 27 million. 5 years, we almost double every year. So I had no time to think about marketing.
But that's interesting because you needed to develop the whole sub-supplier field too.
Absolutely.
They needed to go smaller and smaller and smaller.
We were visiting Japan. We were the first guy I have learned much later asking for saw filters for consumer products. That was military products that was 100 times more costly because we needed to make small RF filters. So we had research project to make direct modulation down to baseband that was never existed before. We had lots of research and lots of going around meeting vendors. Lithium. I think the lithium battery inventor got the Nobel Prize this year, but it was fundamentally mobile phones who was the first main drivers to make lithium batteries.
They should call to you and say thank you.
We were the marketing for them. I think that was we were the market for them.
Yeah, but so you have different leadership challenges here because you still needed to convince everyone, and you convince the customer, the buyer, the supplier, the market, and eventually when you go to the stock market, you convince the investors, and it's a lot of convincing. And
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that you both have is very persuasive way of talking about technology.
By the way, I needed to convince lots of engineers to start working for Ericsson also. That was not an easy task. Otherwise we couldn't develop our new products.
Has that been a challenge all the time to grow in the path that you really needed?
Yeah, of course. You need the right skills, you need the right knowledge, and when we started, we were 20 engineers in a barrack. It was 2 software engineers and 18 hardware engineers. When I quit Sony-Ericsson, I think we were 4,000 engineers here at Sony-Ericsson site, and I think 2,500 was software, 2,000 something. So we really have gone from a hardware to a software, and we now look 10 years later, it's a service. So it's really have been a change there.
Yeah. So adaptiveness always to develop.
And that means that you need new skills based on where you are in the development.
Yeah. What do you do when if we go back to that, when you are smaller and you're just starting to grow, I think that phase is really interesting. We've talked to other scale-up leaders, and what we can see is that when you're leading a small team, it's one way of leadership. It's you talk to everyone, and everyone is in a constant meeting, and everyone knows where we're going all the time, and you can flag, and you have like sort of an equal role distributed to. When did you realize that you needed more structure to grow?
No, I think the limit is somewhere between 10 and 20. I mean, up to 20 people sometimes you can have direct reporting to yourself.
Yeah.
But after that it's too much.
Yeah.
Sometimes even 10 is a limit.
Yeah.
And that means from going everybody reports to you. It doesn't mean everybody has sort of a equal decision weight, so to speak. I mean, they can be very different characters, but everybody from the ones working with helping in invoicing to the ones actually doing the procurement or development will report you. So you have to create them the first line manager. And that's of course a big challenge for the company, because all of a sudden people that are used to be able to talk to you, they cannot talk to you any longer. Of course they can, but not in the same way. So that's I think is the only difficult transformation.
Yes.
And that happens then going from say 15 to 30. After that you have 5 line managers or groups.
After that you can grow.
And then it's more natural anyhow growth, but still you have to have more organizational superstructures, as Mats can probably.
Well, I mean, you came from the.
Of course, during these years it took to go to 20, or a few years at least. I mean, you learned also a lot. I mean, these were the most learning years of my life. I mean, you learned so much these years, and that was a fantastic experience. No, so you realize that, and then you also realize that you can answer, because the first 20 guys were guys at that time, and they were all software engineers basically, or electronic engineers, straight out from school. But they were top ones. I mean, we really got the best. We were attractive, and we got some of the guys that won the competition for programming 3 years in a row, and were top students as engineering physics. And they of course pulled in similar guys with similar standards, so we had an extremely strong engineering team. But they were young, so line managers and these R&D, so product leader, R&D manager, sales manager, all these has to be senior people, always senior people. So here you need to get experienced people from companies like Ericsson, Tetra Pak and others. And that's why the infrastructure of these companies in the region is essential to grow or to scale up companies, because these are the ones you need in these line positions. Otherwise, there will be total chaos.
And
we work chaos.
Were there any problems with convincing them to step into this engineering, playground?
To some degree, I guess that's where your skill as an entrepreneur, persuading people that this is a great opportunity. I mean, I got people from very, very high position going down and working for me. This young guy, and with a company with basically no revenues, and they did that. So many of them, and did fantastic jobs also. No, so I think that's then you have to have a great idea. I mean, even a bad idea can't be pitched that good, but you have to have a great idea. But you also have to pitch it in a great way and in a great framework. And if you can do that, you can attract basically anyone to these companies.
And you, from 20 guys to, I mean, when did you start to realize that I had to manage this?
I can give some anecdotes. For example, Ericsson had a group in Malmö that were developing radio for the JAS fighter plane. And Ericsson killed that group in Malmö just because they needed senior management here in Lund. Per Baldertoft, Svärd, and lots of key guys that then was head of the department. So Ericsson took a great decision when GSM started to kill that group and move it, just to add management. Nowadays you have LinkedIn and you can check. I remember our HR, but in the late 80s, our HR personnel, they were looking at who is member of the Civilingenjörsförbundet in Stockholm, who has a degree from LTH, or who has graduated from a technology KTH, but have a wife who is from Skåne, because these were much easier to convince to come down. And so we had really cost quite a lot, and were quite successful to find the 10-20 key senior people to fill our senior roles back in when we started to develop GSM. Nowadays you can check with LinkedIn and you can do it yourself to find this person.
So you both took this decision to bring in the senior management types too.
Yeah, I think you can't really scale up otherwise.
No.
Because I mean, being a line manager, you are not ready for that when you graduate.
No.
And you have to understand the work to be trustful and someone that they actually respect in doing this. Same with, I mean, operations, production and procurement. That would be disaster setting somebody newly examined for this. I mean, there's so much values at stake here. So clearly.
And did they challenge you? And I mean, if you're you were the founder.
Well, it depends on what you mean. I mean, if I would say something stupid, of course they would correct me and say, no, it doesn't. It's not going to work that way, of course. I mean, but that's why I hired them. I mean, if they wouldn't challenge me, I wouldn't hire them. I mean, they had to be a strong-minded person. And I think that goes into recruiting. I mean, you have to recruit the best, even those that, are smarter than you in some ways, or in all ways if you can. If you're lucky, actually.
If you're lucky.
You're unlucky that you are not it, but you're lucky that you can get them. Yeah.
Yeah, and you.
I have Nils Rudbeck, the same guy, and he's really my mentor in my professional life. He always said you should have one who's playing piccola flute, because someone that's not exactly like you, who say the opposite thing to force you to think, to argue, to really see that you're doing the right thing. But you should not have more than one piccola flute.
Okay,
and his name was Paul Dent, who was the really famous inventor, and I think he had 400 patents. But he suggested to me that I should write all the software in assembler, also for GSM phones, but I said no to that.
No, but I think it's a good point. I mean, because usually the ones I first employ if I have a company is a project leader to structure plans and structure timelines. And I mean, that person has to say no to a lot of things.
Yes.
It has to be and challenge everything. Without that, I don't feel safe in what I believe. I feel safe when somebody says no and have done a definite calculation. So it's also a safety check for me, knowing that somebody didn't agree.
It's about responsibility too. It's that they pitch in to run your company with you. It's not that they work for you.
No, of course not.
No,
of course.
How do you make them feel that way?
I can't stand people that wouldn't say the truth if they know better. I mean, I would fire them for that reason. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can tell a story. In the 90s, I worked in the United States for building up the Ericsson Design Center in North Carolina, Raleigh, and Ericsson bought General Electric's Design Center. That was 20-ish people, and then we hired. So when I left, it was 350. But the main thing with these guys that were they have been round over the General Electric's very tough management. So I felt that whatever I said, they always said yes. And I hated that. so I invented a caps. On one side it was brainstorm, on the other was promise. So I gave it to everyone and I said, most of the time I'm in brainstorm mode, and then I want you to challenge what I say. You give better ideas, but of course sometimes I want to know when they will be ready. But then I changed my hat to promise, and then it worked perfect. and the punchline to this story is 15 years later, when I was CTO for Sony-Ericsson, Sony-Ericsson has created, and then I had a group of research people in Research Triangle Park. So then I went there, 12, 15 years later, and then when I arrived, everyone had this hat. So they remember me for one thing.
That's a success. Yeah, that's a success. So, but during these struggling times that you try to convince everybody, you're learning at the same time, and you're finding the way forward. Do you remember any super difficult steps the key challenges that you had during that early growth phase that you need to overcome?
I think in CellaVision's case we had an enormous problem because early on, because the invention that I sort of did in the beginning was, the idea was basically digitizing and using neural networks to analyze. But in order to earn money, we said we have to invent a a cuvette, a single-use device which will carry the blood and that we will stain the blood on. And so we had to develop this device, and then we had to develop a staining method and a smearing method. And this almost killed the company.
Yeah.
We spent, I think, 2/3 of all the cost the first 4 years in developing this machinery, and we failed. So it was when Yvonne was recruited as new CEO of CellaVision, I had to walk into her half a year later and say, Yvonne, we have to kill this project. And she was recruited on the basis that we had this cuvette, because she came from HemaQ, who has done the same thing, selling a single-use cuvette in blood sampling, but different application. So that was extremely hard, of course, to kill this, because all of a sudden we didn't know how we're going to earn money any longer, because selling one machine is different from selling, you know, something that's a recurrent revenue.
Yeah.
So that was really tough and a shock for all the ones that are invested in the company, and for everyone, I think. So.
And when you, that's very interesting. You're in that room and you're telling her this, and she's quite new at her position.
And she's the CEO, so it's her decision, obviously. But.
Yeah. and from that, she was rather quick in understanding why.
I think so. I mean, I was 100% convinced at that time that maybe this would cost another 30 million, maybe this would cost another 300 million. Neither of these we had. So we couldn't, you know, risk the entire idea, which was a great idea to start with, on this premise. We had to find a way to live with just the great invention of automatically detecting the cells.
And what did you do? I mean, how did you find your way forward from that? What did you have to do at that moment?
Well, we had to raise money and tell everyone that we didn't do this. So there was an enormous cut in the share price, and we had to raise money. So that, I mean, we were not a listed company, but still all the investors that believed in us and were so happy, I mean, of course they were upset. So I think actually at that time I gave away a bunch of shares to, because somebody had just invested on higher value and blah, blah, blah. No, I mean, basically we had to cut down on our spendings, cut down on everything and see, can we survive? And now it doesn't look great any longer, but let's try to survive and let's try to make something out of it. But the enthusiasm was definitely gone for like a year or two, until we could regain it and see that, no, there's still something we can do here.
And if you read the book, which is really interesting, it says that this happened every Christmas. It was a financial crisis every Christmas. So it was like several years of these finding the new money.
Yeah.
So
No, it was.
what does that teach you? I mean, now they're growing like, I mean, what's the turnover? More than 300 million Swedish kronor. 400. Still keeps growing. So now it's a real big company.
Yeah, no, I think that's something I think is worth to remember. I mean, if you know that your application works, your product works, customers likes it, it solves the problem, then you should never quit. Yeah. Of course, there's some check things to do. I mean, can you make money on it and increase the channel? But I mean, basically, if you solve a problem out there that nobody else is solving, it will eventually win. It will eventually become something. I mean, Martin here, building the biggest company in the region from scratch, Axis. I mean, you did these network cameras, and it was a very small business with an Axis, but you knew it was right. And, you know, you had some challenges, I think, with that one early on, but eventually everybody understood it, and that's your success story.
Sorry, Martin Gren for Access Communication, one of the sharp minds here too. So. No,
but I think that's a key. I mean, if you as an entrepreneur know or understand, but you have to test it with an end user, end customer. If it does work, then you should proceed. But please check this early. I mean, don't think that it will work. Don't think that people like it. I mean, actually ask them, test it. Because sometimes engineers are really afraid. I met a French company that in some investment situation, and they wanted to raise 100 million SEK or something. There were 30 guys or 50 guys. They had worked for 5 years on an ASIC. That was a fantastic ASIC, could do a bunch of things. But they never met an end customer. They just thought it was a great thing to have, but they never dared to ask somebody if they actually needed it. And that's a feeling that everybody can get at times. It's scary to ask. You know, it's like asking a girl if they love you. I mean, it's scary. No, but it's actually not a bad thing, because a bad comparison, because this is something you love. You created this and you believe in it. So it's a bit scary to test if it really flies.
So going back to Ericsson and all your, do you remember any big obstacles that you had to manage yourself around and your team?
Yeah, of course, mostly was growth problem, but we also have, you know, display factories that was burning, so we didn't have any supply, things like that. I remember one very early on when our competitors realized that Ericsson started to be a threat. I or my RF team had designed in the specific filter for I think it was an NMT phone very early on, and Motorola bought that company, so we couldn't get that filter, and suddenly I'm sitting here 2 months from launch and I have no filter because our competitors had bought that company. So then we went into Tokyo and convinced Murata to develop a similar filter for us in 2 months, and we probably paid 15 times as much as we should, but they helped us to solve it. So then Murata and Ericsson, I think they are still, Murata is one of the biggest suppliers to Ericsson, thanks to that. And I was invited there when they had a 50 years anniversary, Murata. So I mean, but of course they helped us, but that was really scary when we had started new and someone is buying the whole product. On the other hand, when later when we should start the GSM, our sourcing learned that if we buy the whole Intel's all flash memories for 6 months, the whole shebang, then Nokia will be delayed. So we did the same thing.
You always learn something, don't you? That's actually the big difference here is that you had Ericsson.
We had the money.
Yeah, they had the money.
We had product.
Yeah.
We had the money, so we didn't have that type of problem.
No. If you look at today, no, I have to ask about Bluetooth one more time, because when I tell people what's been developed here, it's not the Ericsson mobile phone that everybody says is the great thing. It's actually the Bluetooth thing.
Yeah.
So, and I have seen the slides that you presented 1998.
Yes, it was in May 1998. I even remember it was Kristi Himmelfartsdagen in Sweden. Those days that was a red holiday, and I needed to go to Tokyo, and I remember at home that my wife didn't like me. Yes, but we presented 3 places around the world. It was in San Francisco, London, and in Tokyo. And since I was youngest, they've sent me to Tokyo, we presented this idea, said that it should be ready in a year from now, that it would cost $5 and be the size of a sugar cube, and they will show a very big prototype, you know, like 10 by 10 centimeters. And I remember I had 200 technology journalists in Tokyo with very bad English trying to tell me that I was a nut. and this will never fly. And it was a little bit like Chris. I mean, here we know that the Moore's law technology we even had in our lab, of course, the first and second generation of the ASICs to shrink it to a sugar cube and the right current consumption. It was not ready when we launched it. But that was a fun experience. And now, you know, they are in all mobile phones, in all cars, in all laptops. The only thing that we have not solved is these beamers that you on the PowerPoint projectors. I'm sorry, we promised that in our slides in '98. That's not solved yet, so we are not fully compatible with what we promised.
But how does that make you feel? That it's everywhere.
Yeah, no, I think it's I mean, even this type of Apple's small, I think quite funny to see that this is, I mean, there you have the sugar cube type of thing, and you put it in the air. So I quite...
You are an Ericsson and Sony guy, and you work with...
Yeah,
this is Apple.
The Apple, yeah. The story is when I left Sony-Ericsson, everyone felt that I was an Ericsson guy. And nowadays I'm a free agent and a consultant with strategy consultant. And I needed to show that I'm not have any bonds to Ericsson. And I realized the best way was to buy an Apple mobile phone.
Yeah.
So this is me to show that I'm independent nowadays. Yes. We learned that when we developed Symbian phones, that the main difference was that Apple's UI was perfect. It was not Symbian phones. So you should also say when you're not doing the right thing.
Yeah, and know how to kill a project.
Yeah.
Just like you said.
Yeah.
This is not going anywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we will soon have some questions from the audience too. You could prepare yourself. to try to challenge these guys. Maybe you have a new idea. But if you look back, well, I would actually ask you this. If you look at the time now compared to the time where you started your journey, what is different? And if you could give advice, 3 good advice to the scale-up leaders that are out there, what should they? What is different? What is their opportunities right now, and what should they go for, or learn, or try? What would that be?
I can start.
Yes.
I'm an electronic engineer from LTH here. That was before the computer science education started. So that's how old I am. And I remember I asked older students there, where should I go when this was the first year, where should I go when I end my studies? You can always go to Västerås. And I say, that was the answer back in 1981, 82. And today you only need to go across the street or to Malmö, and you will be prosper for whole life. So it really shows the difference in the ecosystem and the high-tech companies. I mean, or you could go to Kockums those days also, but I mean that's really the big difference. If I should give three advice, I think number 1, choose your first boss with care, or your first, if you start a company, your first investors, because then you will learn from the first or say senior manager you have. So be picky when you choose your boss. It's not the other way around that the boss should choose you. You should choose the boss. Then I think. Everyone has already been invented somewhere else in the world. Use internet, be international, look outside the Skåne and the Milan and here. Be open-minded because and use technology all around the world if you want to develop things. Don't be afraid to look. If you work with software, open source components exist everywhere. Of course, you can always discuss IP, but that's another story. And number 3, be curious. I think never, you have never learned enough.
No.
I just looked at a number file. It's a mathematical YouTube channel if someone is, that you can always find very big prime numbers that don't have any sevens inside that very big prime number. That's what I learned this morning on number file. I always look at one number file every second day when it's new.
No.
Number theory.
Yeah, number file. Check that, YouTube. What is the best?
We should have
I can give you 3-4 other
club.
very interesting mathematical YouTube channels.
Cool, yeah.
Follow. Yes.
I will check.
That's a good tip too.
Yeah.
That's a fourth tip.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Chris.
So what's your
what's different?
reflection?
I think one big difference is that you're not students anymore, but the students of today, they actually know quite a lot about business. They have this in the education, and there is so many supporting organizations like this one, like the SMILE, like the Lund University Holding, and those are everywhere in Sweden. So I think the ones that come out today actually have quite good ideas how to present a business and what a business needs. So that's a really big difference, because I know nothing basically. I just thought this was a great idea. And then how do you start a company? How does a board work? What do you mean by new shares? All these things were questions to me. So some of these obstacles that we had, they are no longer here. So that means it's much easier to start businesses. And as Mats said, there is many ways you can start businesses here. One great way, which I completely share with Mats, is look around, and you will actually see that the internet type of businesses, the leading country in the world now is China. That's where you find the latest businesses, the latest internet stuff that are that might be in this. It's an ecosystem of internet services, and as you create this ecosystem, new niches emerge all the time. And they will probably do it for another 20 years. So these niches, follow them and see what happens in China. You just copy that and claim that you invented it, blah, 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 and you become a billionaire. But seriously, many of the greatest businesses we've seen in Europe, in internet space, are, I would call them copies.
Stolen with pride.
Yeah.
Stolen with pride. They don't express it the way themselves, but I think that's the case, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they are adding value, otherwise there wouldn't be a business. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity. And then some businesses are hard. You should also realize. I mean, hardware business, for instance, mechanics, electronics. It's so tough to compete with Asians. I mean, it's almost no one succeeds. If you succeed, it's typically either in highly branded items. Branded can always be done everywhere, and we are sort of culture leading. So culture leading countries like Sweden, Europe, maybe California, we can create businesses based on being culture leaders, being the latest fashion, the latest things, or in France. So that's also a niche which will exist for a foreseeable future. But doing hardware to consumers, I mean, it's so tough unless it's extremely branded. Business to business is different. I mean, here is really the return on investment calculation. And Sweden still has a great research, and we have great engineering talent here. So if you create businesses that are specialized, niched, you have a good chance of becoming world leaders. Today, if I look at a business in Sweden that has some kind of turnover in a niched area of technology, I mean, they're usually among the best in the world. So that's just how it is. And that means that it's a great place to do this. I mean, just be patient and grow it. And then realize how long time it takes to grow a business.
Yes.
I mean, very few businesses, except some of these internet cases, or any kind of business within 15 years. It takes 15 years to become a real company for most real businesses. Then there are exceptions, but those are the exceptions. And so if you have an idea that actually flies, be patient. I mean, CellaVision is now 25 years old. Axis became a great company after 15 years, or what?
After 5 years,
What was your turnover after 5 years?
we were profitable.
Well, so that's a different.
Yeah.
I mean,
60 million.
60 million. Okay, that's quick.
That's good.
But then it was leveled for some years before it really grew, or?
No, it was level between 98 and 2003.
Okay, so
When
for
the print
5
cover
years.
were declining and the camera was
Yeah,
growing.
okay, for 5 years
Alright.
there.
So you had to
Okay.
find your new...
We were profitable until
Yeah.
98.
yeah.
But you become a company worth more than 5 billion after 20 years.
Yeah.
Or 15.
IPO was 4.5 million.
Yeah.
2000.
Yeah, and that was after
But
17 years.
But
Anyhow, let's not argue about the details. My point.
My point, your point is that it takes longer than you think.
Yeah.
Maybe you thought it would take 6 months, and it took
After 5 years, Anoto turned over. No, after 7 years, 200 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyhow,
now
but
it's
it
a
does.
competition.
It does take time.
Yeah.
So what else?
And
On tips, practically.
Yes.
I mean, as Mats said, I mean, choosing people here is so important. I mean, to some extent, the best company have the best people, and it's actually not just that once you're the best company, you can recruit the best people. To some degree, it follows from having the best company. If you imagine you always compete with 2 or 3 companies because you eventually will, maybe with 10. If you're 10% better in sort of making decisions, in the speed you execute things, in the way you meet customers, I mean, those 10% will translate into 10% better performance, which cumulative, if you take these numbers after 5-6 years, you will have gained 50% market share of your competitors, or 80% market share. So this will matter a lot. So you have to be extremely picky with that. And one more thing, let's see. Or shall we stop there? No, I'll keep the one as a secret.
have fun.
Yeah.
Yes, why don't we
Have
end
fun.
with that?
Yeah.
You have to have fun. You can't force yourself
No,
doing something that
exactly.
you don't love, right? So with those words, I want to leave the floor open for questions. Do we have a mic? We have a mic, and my super colleague, which is much smarter than me, Lotta, she will.
No, Martin.
Martin wants to compete again.
He will not leave you back
Don't
the
give him the
microphone.
mic.
Give him the microphone.
Come. He wants to say something.
Of course you would like to say something.
Now we're expecting a really tricky question.
Yeah, so it's actually for Mats. I've been arguing enough with Chris
Giving up.
today. I'm giving up, he wins. So Mats, it's a bit of a story and a question. So back in the early days of the iPhone, I had a cracked iPhone with some games. My daughter, 3 years old, was playing with it. She dropped it twice into the floor, and I gave her a severe punishment. You are banned from using the iPhone for 1 week. My daughter starts crying like crazy, and I do what a responsible parent should do, so I call Mats. So I say to Mats, do you hear my daughter crying? And I remember you said, yeah, Martin, are you beating her up as usual? And I said, no, of course, it's even worse. I've banned her from using the iPhone. When are you going to make a phone that a 3-year-old can actually use? And gets this upset of not being able to use anymore. So my question is, when did you realize the iPhone was going to win?
That's a very good question. I think
Obviously now is the
time. First I was the site manager and I was the spokesperson for Ericsson in Lund. So those days I had very big problem to tell what I really, I paid to say some specific words those days, but that is history now. I can tell you, it was three different things. I think your phone call was a very good one.
You remember it?
Yeah, I remember it, but I also remember that I had the same reports from Sony-Ericsson colleagues in US, because the iPhone 1 was launched there before. But I can tell the story is when Chris Rainey was CTO for AT&T, and she was really a powerful, so to say, player in the mobile phone business those days. AT&T was the biggest operators. I had visited her once or twice a year for 10 years. I know her very well. And before we only had rumors about iPhone. We met her and we had an Symbian. They say like this, those days they had a specific division how the price of a phone, how high it could be priced, and then we showed them. I will not call it an iPhone copy because it was the same type of computer power as it was an iPhone, but it cost more. And Chris Rainey said that is no market for that phone. The phones those days cost $300, and this should cost $400 if you should really have a powerful phone. And she said no. Then I met her 3-4 months later, and then she number one said, Mats, we can afford a higher priced phones if the UI is really great, and your UI is not great.
If it actually works.
Yeah, exactly. But my comment was, suddenly, then I realized, my God, she had seen something with that price that really was a good UI. That was my first evidence. The second evidence was that she told us that she will change the price plans. So you had a fixed price, per not per gigabyte, but it was per month, a fixed price. And we have tried to convince the operators in 10 years to go from per gigabyte to fixed price. And they said, no. And suddenly she told us she will change the price points and the way of, how to price the market, price the products. But it will be for one product, and I can't tell you what that product is. Then I realized we lost the game.
You have to admit you were disrupted, Mats.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because you coming from the industry.
Yes.
Talking quality, range, battery life, all these things were key specification points. Apple didn't care. They didn't give shit. They said, we don't care that all these specs are terrible. We have a great UI. So we're going to sell it anyhow. And they did. And it took some time for your organization to understand
Absolutely. This is no defense. It's more to answer your question. And the third thing was that they had their iTunes players, the music players, and you had a direct contact from Apple with your credit card to get your music, to download that.
Yeah.
And I tried the same thing for Sony Ericsson, but then Sony said, we can only sell Sony music. And Apple could say, we can sell all music, but Apple also have that direct contact between my credit card and Apple.
It actually worked.
Yeah,
I remember after that phone call, we went to Gloria's, and you had some colleagues, and I showed the iPhone, and you told me, Martin, the supplier of that filter is horrible, that supplier is really bad, and you told me, the antenna, it's so few decibels per cubic meter.
But as I said, I was well paid to say that those days, so don't forget that.
It certainly was a lot of crap.
You should see my report internally, so I promise you. But you should remember that when you hear CEOs or business leaders say things, They are paid to say some things. Don't forget about that. That is life.
They could be smart behind.
You can call it prostitute, call it whatever you want. But you are forced to say something.
No, don't call it that. We need more questions, I think. Do we have any other really tricky questions for this? Yes?
Well, I don't know if it's tricky, but there's two parts to the question. The first one is, how did you keep your faith and the passion alive internally within yourself and the company when you hesitated, year after year, as you said in the book? And the second part is, what was the best way for you to convince investors when you didn't already have the sheet showing like a profitable business already? What was the best way to convince?
Good.
So I mean, you start out this, you feel this, you see this, you have this passion about this thing, and that's, it just comes very natural then persuading people about this. But of course, a few years later it might be quite tough. But then these sort of pure passion feelings also, you also have other things cooking up. I mean, competitiveness, I think I started this, and I'm going to finish this, I'm going to succeed with this. I mean, really, all these that say this is going to go to shit, I'm going to prove them wrong. So, these kind of things are, at least to me, quite important. So I think competitiveness could be one answer here. Also some kind of responsibility, I guess. And I think that's a reason why sometimes it's good to bring in shareholders, because all of a sudden you have to be responsible to somebody else than yourself. I mean, I can always quit. Who cares? It's only me. But if somebody else invested in you can't really just quit. You're betraying them. So I think that's, you have an external pressure, you feel I have to do this, and I want to do this because I want to prove that these guys were wrong. So I think other things are cooking up here too. Plus, you're in a community. You have these employees, you have a line manager, you have friends, you have all these things. It's a life you're having. And as such, it looks very logical to continue this life, and you're encouraged by the environment who is employed to continue this life. It never became a contradiction, in short.
But the employees were always passionate, or did you have to create that passion with them
when
also?
I fired 200 people in Anoto in Stockholm, and they were not passionate at all. At times it was difficult, but then you have to share that moment, and then you have to start up again with some kind of...
What is the key when you have to do this difficult decision to fire a whole department, or decrease all the costs?
For me it's always been about, I always sort of like the facts. Once you realize how things are, and you realize we can't do this, we can't afford it, or there is no market for this. Once you realize these things and you explain that to people, it doesn't work. They understand. And when I said they were not passionate, they were actually very understanding. They were not happy, but they were very understanding. And I was a bit shocked that evening, because more people came to me saying, "Oh, we are so sorry," but they were the ones fired. It was kind of absurd. But I think it was because we really told them the reasons and why, and we were also quite emotional about it. I was, at least. It felt sad.
But one of the part of the question was how to explain that you will make money further on. How do you do that?
Well, the short answer is you can always make that happen in Excel, but of course that's not a good answer. So what you have to ask yourself is, is it possible to earn money here? And yes, there is. But now maybe the revenue is 5 years down the road is 1/5 what you have that. So that's immediately going to hit valuation, it's going to hit the other investors' appetite to continue to invest in you and everything. So it will have an impact. And again, if you lie, you can only do that once. You're out for life, basically. You can't lie. You have
truthful, yes.
Yeah, stay truthful and factful. And as long as you do that, you can fail. Yeah.
Passion and honesty.
Passion and honesty.
Yeah.
Should we end with that, or do you have a final question? One more, yes. And then we need to have some drinks, and I guess you will stay on.
Yeah, I will
you
stay
can
on.
speak to those more in secret. Yes?
Hello, my question is, how did you find and convince your first customers?
That is a good question.
Well, let's see. Well, let's do CellaVision. I guess, there was various ways. I mean, it was not easy to convince people to buy the first CellaVision because it was expensive, and their manager who made the decisions, I mean, of course we talked to them too, but the guy operating it, he was the one wanting it, and he couldn't take this decision himself. So, well, we did all kinds of things. I mean, we asked them like this, before we had the instrument, I mean, what does it need to take for you to buy this? So they had to make a list of the things today and the price and everything, and then once we have this instrument, we can kind of confront, look, now we have all these. So that made at least him feel a strong pressure inside his organization to go for this, because he wanted it and he has made a promise to us in a sense. So that was one aspect. But then also, I mean, this guy was a little bit crazy himself. I mean, he's a fantastic doctor, was head of the department, good researcher, but he's very sort of liking new stuff and fascinating by new ideas and so forth. So I mean, for him, this was like a revolution, and he was part of digitizing, I mean, very, very early.
Yeah,
this
he was
is
passionate.
This is 20 years ago, so it was very, very early, but he was passionate of that already then. So that helps. So maybe a good answer is to find the right customer. That's the way to find the first customer.
But how?
Looking after those things. I mean, someone that's early adopter kind of customer style, and on the great ideas for startups and scale-ups. I mean, finding the first customer is a key step in all businesses, and it will help you so much with setting the specification right and telling you what will not work. And they will also tell you it's not enough to be 20% better than competition today. They will tell you need to be 10 times better than competition in one dimension of this product that the customer cares about. Not all dimensions, one dimension. Apple was 10 times better than anything else on the UI. Everything else was sucked, but it was enough.
Did you hire somebody for this market research, or did you do it for yourself?
Yeah, I have a comment there. You can always complicate market research, but in the end, common sense and some Googling, we have you come very far with that.
Thereby must eradicate an entire profession. I mean,
it depends, of course, on what type of product you discuss.
You can reach 70% by common sense, but the rest you need special.
But you also need to actually, as a founder or as an inventor, you need to meet the customer, potential customer. You can't send it to someone else.
That.
No.
You can't outsource
That's my
the
advice.
customer.
Yeah.
I think that's my main.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
The first customers, you need to understand. Yes.
I want to make an add-on there, and that is also think of how you sell.
Yeah.
I mean, just selling direct to the customer may work at once, but if you are going to scale up, you need to have a consistent strategy, which means often indirect sales.
I think that's one of the key success factors, that you find a distribution channel strategy.
Yeah. But that's when you know, when you are targeting.
I did it the very first customer we had, the Swedish sugar company.
Yeah.
We immediately had a 2-tier model.
Okay. Great. I think we have lots of discussion to do and reflection to do. Maybe we need to go find our own passion. And if we can't find it inside, we have some spirits and drinks that can help you. So I'd say thank you to our Sharp Minds
Thank you.
and to the audience.